Welcome, folks. I'm Al, and this is the podcast of the Holiday Pride, a Pittsburgh LGBT+ community museum. As most of you have hopefully seen on our social media pages, I attended a conference in Washington, D.C. last week at the D.C. History Center. The conference was in partnership with the Oral History in the Mid-Atlantic Region organization. I presented on the oral histories we have gathered and a little bit about the first pop-up exhibit the museum will put on. I had a friend of mine record the talk I gave to share with everyone. The conference was amazing. I greatly enjoyed speaking with other oral historians and listening to other projects. Many thanks to Letty Gomez, the moderator for the talk, and Kai Walther, the other presenter, who did a fantastic job as well. The speaker that they had wasn't the best, so I had to replace the parts of the talk where I played moments from our oral histories with the original audio. So if you hear a significant difference in sound quality from my speaking to the clips, that's why. I hope you enjoy hearing about this talk.
Okay, well, first of all, welcome to this session on oral histories of queer spaces. I'm looking forward to hearing these two presentations. My name is Leticia Gomez. I live here in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas.
Come on, Texas.
Texas?
Yes,
Come on. I'm a Latina lesbian activist of many years here in D.C. And so I have a personal interest in oral histories, and I've had some experience with oral histories. 10 years ago. I was co-editor on this book, Queer Brown Voices, and which was really a labor of love. And part of the histories, the narratives in this book are from oral histories. And a couple of them were in Spanish, and we had to translate them. So going through that experience with my two co-editors over a period of like 6 years was a labor of love, and I really enjoyed the process. And currently I'm on the board, let me back up. I was on the Latino advisory group here at DC History Center, because the DC History Center is really working on gathering history from all our various communities here in Washington, D.C. And so the work of the Latino Advisory Group is ongoing, and it's a growing effort. And currently I'm on the board of the American LGBTQ+ Museum that's based in New York. And I'm going to hand out some postcards and a little swag, so feel free to take it. And we're in the midst of partnering with the Feminist Institute on a Queer Legacies project, which is not oral histories, but we're digitizing photos and things that people want to share with us from queer elders in New York City and all the different boroughs of New York. So with that, I'm going to just hand this over. You can pass that along as far as it'll go. And I'm going to introduce our first presenter. There on the far left to me is Al Preston. He's a graduate student at Duquesne University's Public History Master's Program in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He is a scholar of United States LGBT+ history and an oral historian. His life goal is to create an LGBT+ museum and community space to better aid and educate the LGBT+ community and the general public. Thank you for coming out.
Hear me okay? Okay. All right, so thank you. So when my wife and I first attended our first Pittsburgh Pride, we've had a bit of a laugh with each other because everyone pretty much was wearing this exact shirt from Target. My wife turned to me to say something and then just went silent, and I went, "What?" And she went, "Oh, you're also wearing the same exact shirt." I came to Pittsburgh to attend Duquesne's public history program, and I knew I wanted to do my research on the queer community there. So I hit the ground running. I sent my name out, tried to find anything, did Google, and there's a reason queer history and Pittsburgh don't really go together. There's no Castro in Pittsburgh. There's no Stonewall in Pittsburgh. Right now we barely have 2.5 bars. So I had a question now. Where was queer Pittsburgh? Was there a queer Pittsburgh? not much is written down in the archives. Most of it sits unprocessed. Barely had eyes on it. And so in doing this search, I found my gatekeeper, Silas, who is a University of Pittsburgh student, undergrad in history. And he has some access to the archives, had been going through it, is pretty much the sole person going through it. And I was hoping to form a connection, and he knew some of the bar owners. And he was more interested in talking to these bar owners about why we only had 2.5 bars. Was it AIDS, which the bar owners, who were all gay men and activists, had participated in the Pitt's Men Study, which was a control group for the AIDS crisis. I personally want to know about the community, so we cobbled together our questions, and we started interviewing the people he already knew. To me, why there was less bars was already kind of answered by our narrators. As activists, they knew if Pittsburgh gained gay rights, the gay people could go anywhere to go to bars or restaurants, which isn't true for the rest of the nation, but it was true for Pittsburgh. But I'll play an audio from those bar owners. You'll hear from Chuck Hauntz, Scott Noxon, and Butch Ijaz.
There were literally not any organizations in our community. We were centered only in gay bars, and that was it.
But it used to be, downtown was humming. I mean, you could literally walk from bar to bar. I mean, they were in an area of 8 blocks all over the place. And it was a lot of fun then. It really was. It was a little rough sometimes down there. You had to watch, of course.
That's how bars play off of each other. They always said when Pegasus was open, Images, the saloon, and this bar was Sidekicks, said all 3 of these bars were packed all the time when Pegasus opened. Everybody would come here and drink. They'd go down to Pegasus, and they were full of drinks.
It's called the Playpen. Very, very rough bars. Gay, straight, black, white. There was lesbians. There was a little bit of everything there. I mean, some of these other bars were almost all men. Like David's bar, that was between 630 and Horseshoe. That was all men at one time. I mean, women just didn't go in. It was just men. But then you had a couple of the bars were mixed. Pegasus was mixed. They danced. They were a mixed bar. 630 was almost all men. That was an after-hours club. The clubs would stay open until 5, 6 in the morning at that time. They got away with a lot of things. There was, and the Embassy Club, that's up where the steel building is now.
I liked Jazzy's, but I couldn't stand walking under the sewage. He had the basement bar was the cistern of the whole house, and it was the Buell mansion. The Buells had a big mansion in Swickley, and that was the Buell mansion down here. The cistern where the pool table was in this block room was all stone. And you'd walk out, and there's a bathroom next to it. And there was a loose piece of drain pipe that would drip sewage on you.
Till New Year's Eve, 5 years, I was in business, and I was doing real well. And there was a drive-by shooting. And at that time, that's over 30 years ago. So the gays were at that time very flighty, so they just left. I went from having, at New Year's Eve, I had almost 700 people there. Within 3 months, I'm lucky 100 people showed up. You know what I mean? That's how bad. And then it got even worse.
Being a bar owner and out, I was one of the people that the police came to when they found dead gay people in the streets or alleys or rivers. And I can tell you, Silas, there were many of them over the years. And many of those crimes, most of those crimes were never solved. And one of them was a boyfriend of mine.
But nowadays, it's much easier. You know, people just don't, they're not in the closet anymore, we'll put it that way. I mean, we were in it so long, didn't know how to get out of it, some of us, you know what I mean?
Well, I heard about it, of course, because, through the grapevine. And I went over there. And this was the pilot study. This wasn't the actual study. This was in 82. It ends up that they needed 100 men. And I was number 90, because that was my study number, 30090. It was all our fault about AIDS, because they already had an underlying hatred for us. Now they had an excuse for hating us.
Now it's not so much. Yeah, I don't think it's cliquey at all. They intermingle. They go to a lot of straight bars now. I mean, let's admit it. Yeah, they're everywhere now.
But yeah, the bookstores were gone away and the bars were gone away, and everybody was on AOL, Men for Men. People just get on the internet now.
That was mine and my business partner's last bar. We had at one time owned 4 businesses in the community. There won't be a need for gay bars. And truly, there isn't a need for them today. And the proof is in the pudding. There were 12 gay bars back then, and there aren't now, because they just don't need them. I sold New York, New York in 1999 because the handwriting was on the wall. There was not going to be a need for gay restaurants anymore, because we had just passed the gay and lesbian rights ordinance. And I knew there was not going to be a need for a gay restaurant anymore, because gay people were going to be able to go and eat comfortably anywhere they wanted to.
So there was definitely more to the story here than just what the bars were saying, what was going on. As honest and kind as they were, the bars were of course biased towards their bars, and they were gay white men. So what about the lesbians? What about the people of color? What were they doing? Where were they going? And so that leads me to that second group of narrators, which are activists, who I ran into mostly on accident. The first one, Diane Watson, I literally ran into on accident at the Heinz History Center. They had a talk about Thursday Night Live, which was an AIDS activist group in the city. And the major talker of that was Tim Zankus, and he introduced me to Reverend Don Hammond, who was a member also of that group, and also the first black man we were able to interview. And they showed us a hidden history of Pittsburgh that we weren't going to find anywhere else. I would have never known about Diane and her activism had I not accidentally run into her. I would have the ability of churches to be safe spaces, the actual activism on the ground. None of this is on the historical record at the moment. Even the Pitts Men's Study, as Hans mentioned, he helped perpetuate, and it was a collaboration between doctors and gay men, barely ever talked about. So we listen to the second group.
Mostly, I think we did a lot of talking about the building of the LGBTQIA community within our community in our city, and how important that was, and how we needed to fight bias.
It took AIDS to politicize gay men, particularly gay white men. I mean, we enjoyed the privilege of being white and male, and we weren't necessarily even as aware of that privilege because it simply was.
And there was a lot of anger in the gay community. And, there was this big thing, that was being said nationally. Well, AIDS is God's curse to gay people. Well, the comeback to that is lesbians must be his chosen people.
I was in the Pitt Men's Study. I was a volunteer. I was the first marketing PR person for the AIDS task force.
Educating, marching if necessary, informing, listening to others in the community and people who are suffering right now. I'm going to hopefully soon have a program that provides spiritual practices for people in the LGBTQIA community that have been traumatized by churches. There are many people in this city, cities all over the country, in which they've either been thrown out or was made clear that they were not welcome. That is unacceptable, and I will be involved in that effort.
You could not discriminate based on sexual orientation. So this gets passed, and then there's this group. They're like, wait a minute, no, this is a bad thing. So they decide to do this petition challenge to put it on the ballot so the whole city would vote for it. They got just enough signatures, okay? They didn't understand that that the signatures were going to be scrutinized. And there was a group of us that ended up, armed with landline phones, that have cords, and in fact, a couple of the phones actually had rotary dials. And we had people from like all the neighborhoods in the city, and we just started calling all of these people who signed this petition. And we got well over 50% of the signatures struck, because a lot of them were forgeries.
Way back in the first March on Washington, and my babies were in their little strollers, and I took them along and punched my fist to the skies just like everybody else was. We were out there.
And Raging Rapids was right next to the train station. So there are all these parents with little kids who are just waiting for the rain to stop. So me, a group of other women, and, we were really angry. And like I said, this was a very angry time. So we got in a circle, held hands, danced in a circle, singing, "If you're queer and you know it, clap your hands. It's a queer world after all." There were probably some other silly ones, and they videotaped it. We're like, okay, what was happening? The parents were applauding us because their kids were being entertained. They didn't know what we were singing. They just saw a bunch of adults being silly in the rain, And really, Kennywood sort of didn't know what to do with this.
I'll be out there, and there will be other things that I will be doing. My biggest thing about ministry is that I'm about the body of Christ, which says that every single human being who acknowledges the Christ is part of the body of Christ. No exceptions. No exceptions.
Then other groups, like that one group who I mentioned, they were really like vitriolically anti-TNL. Because, then have your own group. And they did. So, I think we inspired them to do their thing. We did, because they were like so pissed at us.
As I recall, I might have even only been the one gay person who was African American in that room.
I had a date with Larry Kramer, and he always said he clearly was nice to me. He was so nice compared to his public persona, which was he was this like tough motherfucker who's going to rip your head off. And he said, "Why are you so nice?" He said, "Aren't you angry?" I said, well, I don't think so.
I'm glad they're there and I'm glad that they're working, but I have one desire for every last one of them. Open your mouth. Be seen. Be heard. All the things that are happening in our community and all the anti things going against us, I almost never see or hear from our communities in cities, big cities.
So there's like bits of like the normal typical history here. There's AIDS, there's the anger, but there's these hidden gems that Pittsburgh has to offer. There's dancing at Kennywood in the rain, and stories I haven't gotten to yet, which the first Black Pride in the United States happening in Pittsburgh, which I am grateful to a classmate who's doing more oral histories for me with drag queens and kinksters, so I can get their side of the story. Because there's nowhere to read about any of this. None of the churches kept their records. For example, Betika, an entirely Jewish gay congregation that only exists in a defunct website and some albums at the Heinz Center right now. So, speaking of the Heinz, that brings me to my last group of narrators for this. And these were young people I met at that talk for Thursday Night Live or TNL. They were there for the same reason I was. They were looking for answers. They were looking for where their community was. And speaking to them, it was clear that I knew the answers to their questions. So in this little bit, we'll hear from Allie Miller, Tom Watson, and Claire Joyce, who told me their stories, and I answered their questions.
I would consider Pittsburgh a big part of my identity, I guess.
I went my first Pittsburgh Pride event. I went to 5801 during Pride, and I saw a drag show, and it had like 8 performers, and they were all incredible. And I'd been to drag shows before, but this is my first one in Pittsburgh, and it was just like, it was very cool from where I'm from to like finally exist in my own queerness in this space.
So I walk in, and it's like typical Pittsburgh like dance club. It's just kind of dead. At least back at the time, it was like that. Things are changing now.
Because where I grew up in the high school I went to, I come from a super white and honestly very conservative area, and like my high school was like over 90% white. Like we never talked about gay people. Like, I mean, in my high school, like you didn't say the word gay out loud. Like that was, unless you were bullying someone, like or you heard someone being bullied, like you didn't hear that word, like you didn't say it. And I don't think I went to school with anyone who was openly gay either.
I knew a couple of people in high school who were out as queer. Most of them were bisexual or lesbian. Throughout high school, I kind of, more and more of the people I knew came forward with those realizations and came out. So I knew some of them.
They said like generally like you had to be kind of hush hush about things in Pittsburgh, but people were still pretty like accepting. People weren't like hostile, I guess.
Not everyone. Some people are so open-minded, but some people like in a way feel more small-minded and less open to things and are like a little stubborn, and it feels like stuck in like a past mindset. And I think I run into more of those people in Pittsburgh than I have in other places.
Like Pittsburghers have such a zero tolerance for anybody being hateful. They may be quiet about it, but if they're quiet about it, that means they're probably going to manifest it in other ways, and they will make sure that that person is ousted.
And when I first came out, both with my sexuality and my gender, I longed for someone to like look up to, and I always thought like I do admire people who are like brave and open, but that could never be me. And then I realized that I wanted to become that person that I wish that I had when I came out.
Just identifying everybody as queer at this point in Pittsburgh, because you just never know. Everybody's just so unassuming here, and it's frustrating sometimes, but it's kind of cool because if they're unassuming and if people don't really care about other people's business quite like they do in other places, then what's the harm in asking if someone wants to go on a date? They don't care. They just care that everybody's having a good time, it seems like.
Okay, if I kept working part-time at the Science Center, like they're super open about things. Like that is a great space to exist in.
They compiled these resources, and it documented that Pittsburgh had like oodles of gay bars. Like they were just scattered all over the place. I'm like, what? Like that doesn't make any sense, because any other city, it's a gay neighborhood. It's like a section of the city that's dedicated to just gay bars and gay cafes and things like that.
And I appreciate that history as well, because like I don't know a lot of like the international history and the context you're adding. Like I definitely do not know a lot about that, so that is very cool.
It's a shame there isn't, like, there's a lot of resources out there, I suppose, but we learn about the civil rights movement in school and whatnot, and the civil rights movement's really important. But like gay rights in the US is like, I don't know. I'm surprised it's not something that's talked about more, considering like how important sexuality is for humans.
Wow, I did not know this at all. This is like super fascinating.
Me being a gay man, I'm more focused. I'm more like predispositioned to focusing on the gay things. But I'd be curious as to like what kind of lesbian kind of environments there were too.
I don't really know, like everyone queer in Pittsburgh that I know is like of the younger generation, I guess, and like closer to my age. So I don't know any older queer people to be like, oh, like what was your life like? And now I keep thinking about it.
As a historian, and based on the things you've seen in what you've studied nationally, Pittsburgh, even internationally too, what's like the best thing, this is a tall ask, what's like the best thing that you could suggest a cis gay white dude can do to better the lives of other queer folk, and in Pittsburgh and nationally? Like, just even if it's something simple, even if it's like crazy huge, like you have to sit on a podium like MLK, like what's the best thing? Like, what can someone do?
So a kind of a common thread starts to pop up. Pittsburgh's queer people and history is everywhere, and nobody knows about it. So I come back to that Pride Parade in which we were all wearing the same shirt. There was a common consensus at the parade from the narrators I spoke to while we were there that the color guard was surprisingly good, and there was less tents. My poor wife had the unfortunate time of having me have an epiphany on the bus home about this. Pittsburgh is quiet. Where is queer Pittsburgh? Everywhere. Why does nobody know? Because no one thought to record it. Pittsburgh, queer folks are just folks. When queer people could go around and ask for rights and get to them, there was no need for anyone to record anything or write it down. So these stories are still really important though, and now more than ever. So I created the website, The Holiday Pride, to gather, collect, and share all of these stories because they need to be heard. Pittsburgh chose the power of wide acceptance of queer folks, which it isn't the only way to be queer, but it is Pittsburgh's, and it's clearly worked out well for them. But these stories still matter, and I want to give light to these names, faces, and give hope to the future. Thank you. It was great to see, in real time, the impact this work we've been doing has on an audience. There were a few folks in the crowd who were from Pittsburgh and were absolutely thrilled to hear about his queer history. I got some great questions about the Holiday Pride and Pittsburgh's community. I hope that we can keep reaching more and more people. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sticking around.